Hi, everyone, and thank you very much for joining our webinar today, which is on employee engagement and the rising use of technology. Now, today we are joined by Emma Bridger. So before I hand you guys over to her, I'll give you a bit of a background of our guest speaker today. So Emma is one of the UK's leading employee engagement experts with over 20 years experience gained in a variety of roles in diverse organisations. Emma came to the field via a more unconventional route. So previously lecturing on graduate and postgraduate courses in psychology, her specialist area being behaviour change. Combining this understanding with practical business experience and an MBA, Emma has demonstrated how organisations can achieve their goals and create a competitive advantage by focusing on engagement. Now, Emma has designed and developed this CIPD's range of public employee engagement courses, as well as contributing to and being published within the UK government review Engage for Success. Indeed, Emma now advises the government task force on engagement as part of the Guru Group and has developed and delivered a significant element of their website. Emma is also a regular conference speaker, and case studies detailing her work have been published in many industry journals. Her first book, published by Coke and Page, which focuses on developing employee engagement, received 5-star reviews on Amazon. The second edition of which has just been published and is already receiving great reviews also. So that's a bit of a background about our speaker today. So what I will do is pass you over to Emma.
Thank you, Liam. Hi, everybody. Hope you can all hear me okay. Delighted to be here today. Thank you very much to the guys from StaffConnect for having me back to run another webinar. So I'm going to spend about sort of 15 minutes or so today talking about employee engagement and rising use of technology, give you a bit of background and some thoughts from us, and then hopefully that will stimulate some conversation and some questions from you guys. So to get started, if we could just flick to the next slide. That's great, thank you. I want to start with just a little bit of context, I guess. I want to talk about something that we call the employee engagement gap. So this may well be familiar to many of you on the call today. So really this is kind of talking about the fact that despite a huge increase in focus, attention, activity when it comes to engagement, we're still not very good at it. So a couple of stats for you here. So various reports state that, you know, the HR elite are spending lots of time on it. Cultural engagement, one of the most important challenges that we have. All the figures that you'll look at say that actually we're doing pretty abysmally, actually. And I've used the CIPD measure here. It's from 2015. You might say, well, it's a bit old now. The reason I've used this one is because they actually measure it slightly differently now. But it's actually quite an optimistic measure of engagement at 39%. So if you look at, say, something like Gallup at the moment, they've got a much lower figure for global engagement. Korn Ferry, again, have a much lower figure for global engagement. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is despite lots of attention, lots of focus, lots of discussion, lots of activity, we're still not as good at engaging our people as we should be. And it's my belief that technology could play a critical and significant role in helping to close this gap. It could really help us to engage our people. Obviously, it's not the only answer, but it's one of a range of tools that we could use to close this gap. So moving on to the next slide, we run a survey every year called Spotlight on Employee Engagement, and these figures are actually hot off the press. I think it's its third year. Yes, it's the third year we've run it this year. It's actually still open at the moment. It's open for the last couple of days this week. But I've taken the figures as they were as of sort of yesterday to share with you some hot off the press stats around views on technology and engagement. So you'll see here that the companies, the people that we asked, we've had over 100 people get involved in the survey from all over the world and all sorts of different companies. 16%, as the results stand today, are using an app to help to engage their employees as a tool if you like, to reach out to their employees. That's up from 9% last year. So we can see that there's definitely a movement, an increase in people using technology, but it's still not as a big a number as I thought that we would see. And the results, some of the questions we asked there, you'll see that we're starting to see a little bit more interest, I guess, in using technology to engage employees. So some of the results there, we see that we're asking people about having an app, the potential, those sorts of questions, and you'll see that we're getting some interesting responses there. And I would say that they're definitely on the up from last year. There's definitely more interest in using technology to drive engagement, but people are saying that a significant amount of people are still sort of saying, I don't know a great deal about how it could really improve and drive engagement. So thinking about that, I want to take you on to the next slide. And within the survey that we do, we ask about a whole range of areas related to engagement, but we will also ask about surveying and listening, approaches to listening. And what we're seeing is that companies are definitely getting better at listening more regularly to their people. So you'll see from the results there, again, I've inserted this hot off the press 2018 results. You'll see that companies surveying annually or less than annually are kind of on the decline, and companies essentially asking people to share their feedback and share their thoughts more regularly are on the up. So the result at the bottom actually is quite interesting. Running regular poll surveys as well as a main survey is on the up. So people are starting to cotton onto the fact that it's a good thing to listen to your people more regularly. And this is certainly one of the areas in which an app or an enterprise social network tool such as Workplace by Facebook can really help to kind of turn up the listening with your people. And we know that listening is a critical enabler of employee engagement. So if we just turn on to the next slide. Again, you can see here we asked in the survey about the enablers of engagement, and listening is one of those critical enablers. And overall, they're fairly well adopted. And again, I've put in the results from last year versus this year. So they're kind of shifting, the priorities are shifting around a little bit. But certainly there's an increased interest in employee voice, which is really all about how you ensure that your people are listened to and that they have a belief that their opinion counts. And again, this is an area in which technology can really help. So, those hard to reach employees, people who are working in far corners of the world, different geographies and territories. Technology is a great way to be able to reach out to those people. It can really revolutionise sort of your approach to listening to your employees. So not just having a kind of a regular survey, but having different ways in which they can make their voice heard, share their thoughts or opinions, and really get a sense that somebody somewhere in the organisation is interested in what they have to say. So of course, line managers play a critical role in that as well, but technology can really help to reach those employees who are traditionally hard to reach. So moving on to the next slide. So the spotlight on employee engagement results I've just shared with you kind of give a kind of a big picture overview of how technology can begin to start to help us to listen more effectively to our people, and there are a whole range of different ways that you can do that. But we also wanted to find out whether we should be using these technologies to engage our people. So we did a piece of research about 18 months ago now that was looking at enterprise social networks, and that included apps, so basically digital technologies, saying can they make us happier at work? And when I say happier, what I mean is can they help to increase and improve engagement, and can they help to increase and improve what psychologists call well-being at work? So when we talk about well-being, often we, in workplace today, well-being is used to sort of synonymous with sort of, the health and well-being offer, so things like gym membership and free fruit and those sorts of things. Whereas when psychologists talk about well-being, they're really talking about the absence of kind of mental ill health. So they're talking about happiness, if you like, is what a layperson would call it. So we did a piece of research and said, okay, so let's have a look at those people who have these technologies, and there's people that don't have these technologies, and people that are using them and not using them, and say, do they have an impact? Can they help us to really close that engagement gap that I talked about earlier? So I'm just going to share with you a few of the results that we came out with. So just on to the next slide here. As I said, we wanted to find out, who was using these kinds of technologies, and why were they using them? What was the driver for bringing them in? And how were they using them? And then most crucially, I guess, what were the impacts of using these types of technologies on engagement and well-being? So just moving on to the next slide. Slide here just kind of gives you an illustration of who took part. So we had 106 different organisations. High percentage were in kind of managerial and above roles. So I think if we were to do this again, we'd definitely like to reach out to those people who are, in non-manager roles a little bit more. And all sectors represented, every kind of different sector was represented pretty much. And so yeah, you can read those results on that slide, telling us some very interesting stuff there. Moving on to the next slide, we wanted to look at channels and accessibility. So just flick forward a slide. That fairly hard to read slide there in a nutshell told us that traditional channels were still very, very prevalent. So email and intranet were still kind of top of the tree, and your apps and other methods were much lower down. So people are still receiving information through various traditional channels of email and intranet, which is quite interesting. But I think this is kind of, I guess, this kind of perception that everybody's got an app now, everyone's using some kind of really whizzy social network, Workplace by Facebook or Jive or Yam or whatever it might be. But actually the people we spoke to, and it's only a small sample, the people we spoke to are still very much kind of using traditional channels. So moving on to the next slide, how are people accessing information? Now this is really interesting. So I just want to pull out here the fact that 20% of people we spoke to are accessing information at work through their personal mobile device. So not a business device, their own mobile device. And I think this, again, presents a really great opportunity to engage with those hard to reach audiences. If the content is great and we get this right, then I think there's a real appetite here for people to say, you know what, I'm okay with accessing this stuff through my own device. Obviously, those people that have got laptops or desktops at home or in the office can use that method to access information. But I think the personal mobile device is definitely an opportunity for us. And as I said, this piece of research is about 18 months, maybe 2 years old now. So I think that I have a hypothesis that may have increased since then. So we'll be kind of updating this at some point next year. So moving on to the next slide. So, you can see from this slide, the numbers speak for themselves. ESN use is significant. So, of those people that have it, and 45% of the organisations who took part actually have it, over 90% are accessing it regularly. So, people are using it. When they've got it, people are using it, which I think is a really interesting finding as well. That was a lot higher than I would have expected, to be honest with you. So moving on to the next slide. So how do you use your company's ESM? So there's a range of ways in which people are using these technologies. And again, you can see that these are all positive outcomes that you've been looking for with engagement. So, more collaboration, able to make my voice heard, to be part of something, to interact with like-minded people. So people are using it in a very kind of collaborative way, in a way to connect with other people, as well as helping to find information that they need. So if you think about kind of traditional intranets of the past, they were much more about kind of knowledge management, sharing expertise, finding stuff that you needed to do your job, whereas the kind of new generation technology that we have coming through now, be it through an app or enterprise social network, is much more about kind of like collaboration, connection, and we know that those are absolutely correlated. So there's not causation, there's correlation with engagement. So good news there. And moving on to the next slide. how would you rate your experience? And again, I'm not going to read through all of those individually because you can read for yourselves. But you'll see from that slide that a really positive experience actually. And again, quite surprised by that, just how positive the experience is for people, using ESN. So, building relationships, being part of something, part of a community. All really, really good outcomes that you would hope to associate with a workplace that has high engagement. So again, really, really great news there, and showing that ESNs are having a really sort of positive impact on how people are feeling at work, which is great. So moving on to the next slide, I'm just going to skip past that header slide. So we asked the question, does the use of ESNs impact engagement and wellbeing? So this is a kind of the big question. So, some really nice results so far, but actually, is it going to help to increase and drive engagement? And I think the answer overall is yes. I'll give the game away here, but I'll just talk you through how we got to that result. So you can see on this slide, how engaged are you? So we took some questions that are from some psychologically tested psychometric tools, so we can actually use them to say how engaged are you and what's your well-being like, etc. If you're interested in what those tools are, I'm happy to share them with you. We looked at how engaged people were, and we compared those that use ESN with those that don't use ESN, and you can just flick down that list, and you can see that in the main, those people who are using ESNs or apps or technology are coming out kind of slightly higher, some significantly higher than those who are not using. Again, this isn't, we can't say it's a causation here, only correlation, but there's definitely something that's worth looking into. Those people who are using technology are, on the whole, more engaged, so more likely to recommend the organisation as a great place to work. The key one that's big difference is I feel a strong personal attachment to where I work. So people who are using technology significantly more likely to respond positively to that question than those who aren't. So some interesting preliminary results here that are saying that we're seeing a link between engagement and use of technology from an app or ESN point of view. So moving on to the next slide, we looked at well-being at work. And when I talk about well-being, I'm talking about psychological well-being, and we use what's called the General Health Questionnaire, which is a valid and reliable tool that psychologists use to assess this. And again, what we see is that overall, ESN users appear to have higher levels of well-being than people who aren't using ESN. So, and some quite big differences here. So ESN users are more likely to feel capable of making decisions, 92 versus 77%. More likely to feel they can overcome difficulties, 87 versus 69. So some really big differences here. More likely to think of themselves, less likely to think of themselves as worthless, and more likely to feel happy at work. So again, some key differences here. We don't yet know if it's causation, but there's definitely a correlation here. It's definitely something that's well worth looking into. So moving on to the next slide. Just going to just move on to the next slide, Liam. Hello.
How's that work? Should be on the next slide, in a nutshell.
Okay, if you can move on to the next one after that.
I think that's it on the slideshow.
Oh, okay. There should be a last slide saying in a nutshell.
Oh yeah, this one here.
Okay, I'm not seeing that at my end. Don't know what you guys are seeing. I'm not seeing that. Anyway, I can sum up because we're on the last slide anyway. So just to kind of conclude then, what we found is that ESN use and app use, technology use is more frequent than we expected, and primarily is being used as a tool for collaboration. They're definitely being used in a different way to its predecessor, which was kind of the old school intranet. So great that it's being used as a tool for collaboration. And we also find that those people that are using these new technologies tend to have more pride and more attachment and more what we call vigor at work. So we are finding those kind of those key attributes of engagement are more likely to be there when people are using these technologies. I would also find that ESN users are motivated differently to non-ESN users, and that ESN users tend to have higher levels of well-being. So in a nutshell, what we've found is that the early research is showing us that there is a huge opportunity to use these new types of technologies, apps and ESNs to help us to close that employee engagement gap that I talked about at the beginning, by providing, ways of reaching hard to reach employees, by giving people an opportunity to make their voice heard and feel listened to, by providing opportunity to collaborate, to connect with other like-minded people. And what we're going to be doing is really delving down into these results and trying to find out where the causation is and what's causing what and which comes first. Is it high engagement? High engaged people are more likely to use these tools, or do these tools result in high engagement, and how that can help us kind of essentially use technology to close the employee engagement gap and use these new tools to help us increase engagement at work. So that's it from me. So I would love to hear if you have any questions or thoughts or comments. So feel free to let Liam know now.
Perfect. Well, thank you very, very much, Emma, for that. Real fascinating stuff, and especially, those results being from those survey results being so fresh. It's fascinating to see what the results are going to be this year. So, as Emma said, we're now going to open it to a nice kind of Q&A. So there should be a questions area kind of in the control panel that you should see. So if you do have any questions, feel free to ask them. So we actually have one already here. Let me just open it up. 93% are accessing it regularly. How would you define accessing regularly? What is the criteria for that?
Yeah, what I can do is I can share the full report with you guys afterwards. We asked, if they were accessing it. I think it was daily, weekly, monthly, less than monthly. And I think, if memory serves, we defined regularly as kind of weekly, up to weekly. So daily, a few times a week, or at least once a week.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Another question here. How do you drive engagement on enterprise social networks? So how do you ensure that the content on the platform is relevant for the employees? What communication strategy would you recommend? And what kind of content would be the right content to deliver on ESM?
Yeah, I could do a whole day on that, because there's loads in there. I think for me, the starting point is to be really clear on the purpose. So start with the strategy. There's so many people, and I put my hand up as well. I love shiny new things, and when I did 10 years in house myself, and something kind of new came out, I'll be all over it. And I think it's really important just to take a step back and say, what's the purpose? What's the problem we're trying to solve? And therefore, what's the technology that we're going to need? So, there are so many different tools out there now. Obviously, StaffConnect is one of them. There's so many different types of tools. So it's about saying, well, what's the purpose, first of all? What's our strategy? What's the problem we're trying to solve? And therefore, which solution are we going to go down? I think that helps in itself. I've seen so many companies just kind of go out and just buy one, and then it doesn't really land very well because people don't really know what the purpose of it is. Why have we got this new thing? What's it there to do? How am I supposed to interact with it? I think it's important to involve employees in any piece of work to implement any new technology like this. So it's not something that's being done in ivory tower to them. You're involving them. You're using kind of change champions, change agents, if you like. You're getting them involved in the design, so that when it lands, you've got a much better sense of who your audience are and what they're interested in and what's going to engage them. There's so many different solutions out there now. Some are primarily for having two-way conversation, listening. Some are much more for kind of sharing kind of company information. Obviously, video is critical these days. We like nice short videos, having content that's able to be presented as video is great. So I think those are some of the kind of initial thoughts that come to mind. So involving people, doing it with them, not to them, co-creating the solution with them, and being really clear on the purpose of the technology in the beginning, so that you are implementing the right solution rather than the latest kind of sexy, nice shiny thing.
Mhm. No, I would agree with that. What I found when kind of speaking to kind of potential prospects and stuff like that is, the requirement is always kind of the fundamental issue there. Once you figured out your requirement, then it'll be a lot easier to figure out kind of which solution and kind of what types of content you'll want to be adding. Another question here is how do you regulate ESM? Because, there is definitely some risks when you let your employees kind of voice what they want. So what there's a scenario here, what do you do when someone starts a negative comment and maybe it could go downhill from there?
Yeah. So I think it's a really good point, and we talk about the organisational maturity. So very, very quick story. So years ago, I was working in house. I was at EDF, and I was a part of a kind of a merger program where three companies came into sort of joined into one company, and I was looking after the comms team. And one of the companies had got an intranet site, and they had an employee forum on the intranet site. And this is back in 2002, so it's a long time ago. And the team was brought together, all the different comms teams brought into one, and I was kind of heading up the team. And I found out that we had one person whose full-time job it was just to man the comments that were coming through this employee forum on this kind of old school intranet, but they had like sort of, you can say anything you want and anyone can see it. So, early sort of social media, although we didn't know that's what it was. And clearly, part of the merger was kind of looking at operational efficiencies and all that sort of stuff. We couldn't afford to have somebody whose full-time job it was just to kind of man these comments and to take stuff down that wasn't appropriate, and most of it wasn't appropriate. And part of that was because people had never seen anything like this before, and they didn't know how to use it. And this is obviously pre-social media days, and people just saying what they wanted, when they wanted, to who they wanted. And also it was anonymous as well. So it was absolute chaos. So what we did was we got together as a team. We said, actually, it's a really cool tool. And we, saw the benefits straight away. But clearly, we're not ready as a company to use it in a professional adult way. And that's not any disrespect to the people that work there. It's just it was all kind of brave new world stuff. We didn't know how to use it, we didn't know how to use it effectively, etc., etc. So what we did was we decided to keep it, but we kind of changed the governance around it, if you like, and we rebranded it and called it Think Tank. And we said, right, we're not going to take this away, but we need to kind of use it in a much more productive way. Because at the moment, people are kind of moaning about there being no milk in the fridge and that sort of stuff. It's not productive. It's not a great way to use this, what could be a really cool tool. So we rebranded it Think Tank, and we said we're going to run a think tank once a month on subjects, and sometimes we'll decide, sometimes you can decide. You can tell us what you want to run a think tank on, and what we'll do is we'll run it over a few days, and you can come on and you can have your say, but it won't be anonymous anymore. We're going to see who you are, because we're going to have a productive conversation, and we'll get the right people lined up so they can be interacting with you on the days we're running the think tank, so we can have a really useful conversation. And we launched it, and the first think tank we did was when EDF had just won the Nectar card deal. So I had a think tank about how we could use this opportunity with Nectar, and it went down really well. There was a purpose to it. We had product development, marketing, various commercial entities sat there also interacting, being kind of warmed up. They needed to go and interact on the day that it was happening. And then the next month, I think we did one that was just for the call centre, on something that was happening in the call centre. No, that's right. They redesigned their balanced scorecard as it was at the time. Knew it wasn't working. So right, let's have a think tank on redesigning the balanced scorecard. So we used it in that way, and I think looking back, I wish I'd realised what we were onto, because I could have, set up a really early doors kind of digital app and made a million, but I didn't realise how, what we were onto. But it worked really, really well. It was about kind of understanding what was right for the company and where they were at, what their maturity level was at in terms of being able to use a tool like this in a professional way. So I guess that's my story, to kind of illustrate that you can use these sorts of tools in different sorts of ways. It's about understanding what's going to work well in your organisation.
Cool. Thanks for that, Emma. One final question here is, do you have any tips for getting employees to buy in to a new comms tool?
Yeah, so like I said before, having a really strong sense of purpose. It's not just a shiny thing. It's there for a reason. It's there to help you make your life better. Again, using depending on what the tool is, if it's something like a new piece of technology, using kind of change agents can work really, really well. So people who are role modeling, people who are going on and having, using the tool in the right way and talking about how it's helped them or how it's benefiting them. Ensuring the content is spot on. So, people might go on and use a new tool initially, but if the content's not right, they'll very quickly lose interest and never ever use it again. So yeah, I guess those are kind of my initial sort of thoughts on how you get people to buy into using a new tool.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for that. I think that is about it. I don't think we have any more questions. So just want to say, Emma, thank you very, very much for joining us today. You've just been very informative as usual. What I'll do, Emma, if it's good with you, is we can share the your report to everyone that's registered for the webinar. Is that good with you?
Yeah, that'd be great. And if I could just make a plea, if anybody could spare 5-10 minutes to go on to our current live service Spotlight On survey and fill it out, I would be hugely grateful. I could tweet that out and you could share, if you share that as well, Liam, that'd be great.
Sounds good. I'll send the link to everyone as well.
Cool, wonderful. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Sounds good. So if you do want to find out any more about People Lab, all of Emma's info is on screen at the moment. What I'll also do is, as a follow-up, is send you all the links to the survey and the article itself. And if you would like to find any more about StaffConnect or employee engagement, we can have those conversations then. But for now, just want to say one final thank you to Emma. Thanks very much for joining. Thank you everyone else for joining our webinar today, and hope you have a good rest of your day. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.